He waited until the city exhaled its last light. From the back seat of his black sedan he watched the house through rain-glazed glass and felt the kind of unease wealth rarely buys away, a quiet, hollow wondering about what he had not seen. He had driven past this block a dozen times before, each pass cataloguing the modest porches, the sagging steps, the curtains that never matched. Tonight he had stepped out of the limousine of a charity gala because one name on a donation plaque had pulled at him like a splinter under a fingernail. He wanted to see the person whose work had been read aloud between courses and whose name had been clapped at under chandeliers. He walked across wet pavement, the city lights haloing his features, and felt every one of his suit's layers like armor he couldn't shrug. He had no business here, he knew that. He had money enough to buy an island but not the courage to enter a life where bills were paper stakes, not sugar cubes. He climbed the steps and hesitated at the door, listening for anything that might tell him whether the world he imagined was the world inside. Laughter, television, a radio, anything. The door was unlocked. A small kindness from a house that offered less to those who depended on it. The hallway smelled of boiled cabbage and old soap. He stepped inside and his polished shoes clicked like foreign coins on the worn linoleum. The living room held the kind of silence that keeps secrets, a recliner with a patch on the arm, a lamp with a crooked shade, family photographs in an uneven line. He moved toward the photographs, pulled by the same curiosity that had sent him here. Faces looked back at him, young, smiling, stubbornly ordinary. Children in school uniforms, a woman with a tired smile, Marvin in an apron holding a birthday cake in one of the frames. There was a narrowness to everything, thrift store frames, handwritten captions, the same background of a small yard. A curtain twitched, a small figure moved across the next room. He froze. "Marvin," he called, and the voice that answered was the same he had heard at work, slow, warm, slightly amused. "Who is it?" "It's me," he said, almost losing the words. He could have told a lie, spun a tale about a wrong address, but he didn't. I wanted to see where you live." Footsteps approached. Marvin appeared in a faded sweatshirt, his hair uncombed, his eyes the same patient brown that had watched him through contract signatures and late-night calls. The man blinked, measured the suit, the shoes, the unfamiliar smell of perfume in the air. "You shouldn't be here," Marvin said, and it wasn't a scold, it was a map back to propriety. "I know," the millionaire answered. "May I come in?" Marvin hesitated, then stepped aside. The millionaire crossed the threshold as if into a new country. The room seemed to hold its breath. A child sat at a battered table doing homework by the lamplight. A woman sat nearby stitching. She looked up, and her eyes widened with the practiced neutrality of someone who recognizes a face from a life that is not theirs to own. "Mr. Halpern?" she asked, using his surname as one uses a tool, precise, efficient. You can call me Daniel," he said, and he heard the oddity of hearing his name here, where the air tasted of onions and the day's washing. He wanted to ask questions, to pry like a curious journalist, but the scene softened him. The child, no more than 12, looked up, then returned to math problems without ceremony. "Would you like some tea?" Marvin offered automatically, the way hosts offer shelter to guests who should not be there. The millionaire watched him move with sure, economy-earned gestures. There was tenderness in the small things, how Marvin refilled the kettle, how he smoothed the tablecloth with an absent hand. As tea steamed between them, the millionaire felt like a thief. He had come to observe, to check a theory about class and gratitude. He believed that his money had created a distance, a shield from the rawness of life. He thought he'd grown softer because others demanded gentleness. He thought wrong. "Why are you here?" Marvin asked, finally, more direct than the millionaire expected. "I saw your name on a plaque," Daniel admitted. "At a gala. I wanted to," he stopped, searching for a phrase that didn't taste like arrogance. "I wanted to see the life behind the work." Marvin's laugh was small. "You mean the life behind the shoes?" The room softened into a kind of ordinary warmth. Conversation settled into a rhythm as if the millionaire had been invited to the middle of a domestic story rather than an intrusion. He learned about overdue notices on the doorstep, about a school principal's kindness that had paid for one child's uniform, about a recipe for corn cakes that had been passed down from Marvin's mother. He learned about second-hand stores and how Marvin saved ribbon ends for wrapping birthday presents. The millionaire listened and realized he'd never learned about the arithmetic of keeping a small life afloat. When the conversation drifted toward the child's room, Marvin's voice changed. Unspoken things gathered there like birds. "She's been sick," Marvin said, finally. "My sister, she's been off and on. The hospital, we try to keep things normal for her, but sometimes. He gestured at the cramped ceiling as if it could hold their effort. Daniel's mouth went dry. He had expected hardship, he'd memoized images of hardship to prepare himself. What he had not prepared for was how close the suffering sat to laughter at this table. The sister, fragile, a woman in her 20s, appeared at the doorway. She looked older than her years and wore a cardigan like armor. Her smile was quick and practiced. "We're all right," she said. "Don't fuss." Marvin's sister insisted on politeness that masked exhaustion. Daniel watched the interplay, how Marvin simplified bills into manageable schedules, how he rationed joy into small celebrations. The sister's cough was small but frequent, a metronome to their evenings. Daniel's chest tightened. If he had been less careful with his curiosity, he might have said the wrong thing, made a gesture that would have wounded rather than helped. Instead, he kept quiet, watching. When the sister wandered to the window and pressed her forehead to the glass, Daniel noticed something in the sill, a row of jars, each with a ticket stub, a pebble, a folded paper, tiny artifacts of a family's effort to collect small wonders. One jar held coins labeled emergency. Another held bus fare. A third held a paper heart with a child's shaky handwriting that read, "For Mama Fun Day." Daniel's eyes stung because his own world had no jars. His emergency fund was an app with an unread icon. His bus fare was a stack of plastic cards. He had people whose names were numbers on spreadsheets, but he did not have a jar labeled for Mama Fun Day. He excused himself and moved through a narrow hallway, the floors worn to a near sheen by 100 shufflings. At the end of the hall, a door stood slightly ajar. He pushed it and found a small bedroom, a single bed, a poster of a singer pinned to a wall, a nightstand crowded with paperback novels and a pillbox. The sister sat on the edge of the bed clutching a dog-eared notebook. "You're late," she said, but she smiled. There was no venom in it, only the tired humor of someone who has learned to make light of schedules and disappointments. "I'm sorry," Daniel said. He could not help himself. "I didn't mean to intrude." She tilted her head. "You're that man from the office. Don't worry. People come and go. Marvin brings stories. He brings a lot of people." "I wanted to say thank you," Daniel said, and for a moment he almost laughed at the absurdity. "For everything Marvin does." He stopped because the words felt insufficient. She opened the notebook and held it out. "He keeps a list," she said, "of things he promises to do when the money comes. He calls it his big book of maybe. Silly, right?" Daniel's hands brushed the notebook. The cover was frayed, the pages filled with neat columns and tiny sketches, a child's drawing of a kitchen with a bigger stove, a plan to repaint the porch, a list of colleges that might someday ring their bell. There were dates crossed out and new dates penciled in. In the margin, in Marvin's deliberate hand, were small promises: buy new shoes, go to the dentist, pick up sister's meds. Daniel felt each line as if it were a stitch in a garment he had never had to mend. "Do you want to read?" the sister asked. He did. He read about community college applications, about a broken heater, about a birthday cake that had been salvaged from a discount shelf and decorated with store-brand frosting. There was a note about a fund for a tooth extraction and another about saving for a winter coat. Page after page, the list formed a map of deferred desires, and the quiet, stubborn love that paid for them. When he reached the back of the notebook there was a photograph tucked between pages. Marvin, younger, standing beside a uniformed firefighter, both of them grimy and laughing, a scrap of ribbon pinned to Marvin's shirt. On the back in Marvin's handwriting, "The day I burned my shirt, but saved our rent." Daniel felt something snap. The neat architecture of his life, contracts, deals, the cadence of profit, gave way to a single unadorned fact: this man had chosen to bear burdens so others could sleep. He had chosen small daily acts in place of glory not because he had to but because he could not do them. He closed the book and sat on the edge of the bed. The sister watched him, eyes patient. "People think because you make a certain kind of money you must be happy," she said quietly. "They don't see that you miss things. They don't see that you don't know how to fix a broken heater or how to cook a corn cake. You have other things." Daniel's throat tightened. He had a reputation among his peers for an efficient heart. Generosity in his circles was often a line item. Tonight he realized how currency could masquerade as connection. He imagined his donations, big checks whose printouts hung in marble lobbies, and felt them flattening into meaningless signatures. "Why didn't you tell him?" Daniel asked at last. "About the gala plaque? About the recognition?" She shrugged. He'd shake his head. He'd say we don't need a plaque and then hide his face under a pillow when someone got soppy about it. Besides, he'd be embarrassed. He doesn't like light on him. The millionaire's mouth went dry. He had never had anyone hide from light on his account. He had never had his kindness be something to hide from. He realized then that his tears were not going to be about guilt alone. They were about recognition. All his life people had bowed when he entered rooms. Very few had seen the things he could not buy, the capacity to stand in a small kitchen and make a child's fever feel less small. He had thought charity was a ledger, he learned now it was a language, and Marvin had been fluent. He left the room without making a speech. Outside, rain had softened to a hush, and the city seemed to cradle the house in its palm. He walked back into the living room and found Marvin folding a blanket with the same care he used at work when ordering lunches for the board. The sister sat by the radio, humming a song she could not remember the name of. "Will you?" Daniel began, unsure of what the right gesture might be. He had rehearsed speeches and written checks in his head. None of it fit. Instead he went to the corner where the jars were kept. He took a pen from his pocket and, with clumsy hands, uncapped it. He had thought of leaving a check, a gift card, a donation. Instead he wrote something on a small piece of paper and folded it into a neat square. Marvin watched him with a look Daniel could not decipher. "What are you doing?" "Promise," Daniel said. "A different kind. Not on paper for tax. A promise on my end." Marvin laughed softly. "You'll announce it in the press." "No," Daniel said. "I'll start by fixing the heater. And the dentist. And the bills. But mostly he faltered, then forced the sentence through. "I want to learn. Teach me how to make the corn cakes. Teach me how you save ribbon. Teach me how to be someone who doesn't need a plaque to feel needed." For a moment Marvin didn't answer. The room held possibility like a held breath. Then Marvin reached out and took the folded paper. He opened it and read the neat scroll, "I will come back. I will help. Not for cameras. Not for plaques. For family." Marvin looked up, and something broke in Daniel's chest like glass. The millionaire felt his eyes sting and then overflow. Tears tracked down his cheeks, unashamed and hot. For a man used to shielding himself behind stoicism, it felt like the most exotic humility. The sister smiled and reached forward to squeeze his hand. "You don't have to cry," she said lightly, though her voice held relief. "It's a lot to take in. But if you mean it, you mean it. That's all." "I mean it," Daniel said. The words were small and plain and they carried a weight he had never accounted for.